Right, this is Tarn House, or it will be very soon. Now Tarn House, I'll talk about the name first. Tarn, I've already mentioned that it is a small pond. It comes from the Viking for teardrop, and you'll hear Tarn a lot in the Lake District. How? That's another Viking word for hill. So you can translate it into small pond up in the hills. Now, there used to be 3 tarns here. Now there is one. The landscape is beautiful, particularly on a clear sunny day, which alas we don't have today. And the landscape is entirely man-made. And the man that made it was a guy called James Marshall. Now he was a member of Parliament over in Leeds, which is on the east side of the Pennines, and he made his money from wool. And he wanted to create a particularly stunning landscape so he could invite his friends up here and impress them with what he'd done. Now what he did was he built a dam and flooded the bottom of the valley. So then his 3 small tarns became one reasonably sized one. And he planted trees from all over the British Empire and landscaped a lot of the ground round about. And there's no doubt about it, he did a fantastic job, because it is beautiful. Even if you've never been here before, there's a good chance that you may well have seen a photograph of it sometimes, either on a postcard or a calendar, because it is one of the most visited, one of the most popular parts of the Lake District. Now when Mr. Marshall died in the late 1920s, his son, who was also called James Marshall, inherited the estate. The estate was called the Monk Coniston Estate. That harks back to the time when a lot of the land was under the control of the monasteries. Now, the young boy wasn't as good with the money as the old man, and he soon found himself in financial difficulties. Now, by this time, the Forestry Commission were also very much in evidence here, and they had their eye on this estate, and what they wanted to do was cover the whole area in conifer trees. I know there are a few conifer trees, but they wanted to sort of plant them en masse so you wouldn't be able to see anything else. Now Beatrix Potter was very much in evidence in this part of the Lake District, so she was able to buy the Monk Coniston estate, and what she did was she gave half of it to the National Trust straight away, and she managed the other half for them. So she was like the warden, as it were. And back in the early 1930s, Beatrix Potter wrote things like she was concerned about the amount of young people that were coming up here lounging around and gramophoning. You can see it now, can't you? It does get very, very busy. I know it's deserted today, but it's a big money spinner for the National Trust, because there are car parks here that cost quite a lot to park your car. There is also always the roving recruiter, the guy who encourages you to stump up £50 to join the English National Trust. So it brings in a lot of revenue. Having said that, you do get something for it. You get to enjoy this spectacular countryside. Sorry? I'm sure it's a lot nicer now that it's one reasonably sized tarn rather than the 3 muddy puddles that would have been here before it. I think it's beautiful, and when the mist's up, you can see all the other mountains round about. Now the National Trust also create footpaths which allows people who perhaps aren't maybe not as fit as they once were, they can come and walk in the Lake District. You can even get a pushchair around on these trails. So it's providing sort of access to the countryside for all. So next we're going to be visiting Brantwood, the home of John Ruskin. I don't know whether any of you have heard anything about John Ruskin in the past. If you have, I'll apologise, but I will sort of give a bit of input on John Ruskin for those that haven't. John Ruskin was born in 1819 in London, and his parents were quite wealthy. His dad was like a sherry merchant. But Ruskin was brought up to the Lake District when he was about 5 years of age. He was brought up to Derwentwater near Keswick, where you will be going yesterday, and it had a very profound effect on him. Ruskin was a child genius. He used to write things when he was about 8 years old that just defied belief, the sort of level of intelligence and maturity that in his writing. Now Ruskin went on to Oxford University and he became professor of art there. When he was in his early 20s, whilst he was at Oxford, he wrote a series of books called Fine Painters. So, and he's probably best known as a Victorian art critic, but there was a lot more to Ruskin than that. He was a great social thinker, an educational reformist. A lot of his 19th century ideas became 20th century reality. Things that I'm sure you'll all agree with: free education for all, free libraries, Clean Air Act, Town and Country Planning Act. Lots of things that Ruskin was these were very much his ideas. The National Trust was formed, and people in the Lake District think it's all about them. They forget it's the English National Trust. Now Ruskin doesn't get much credit for that, but it really deserves it, because two of the founding members of the National Trust, one of them spent a lot of time in the Lake District, was a churchman called Canon Hardwick Rawnsley. The other one was a lady called Octavia Hill. Now it was Ruskin that introduced these two to each other at Balliol College in Oxford, and there's no doubt that both of them were very, very influenced by Ruskin's ideas. So he doesn't get the credit for the National Trust, but believe you me, he introduced two of the founding members, and I'm no doubt that a lot of their ideas were very, very much his ideas. Ruskin did suffer with lots of mental health problems and breakdowns, and it was in, I think, about 1871 that he decided that he wanted to move away from Oxford and have a less pressured life, and he came to live in the Lake District. Now he bought Brantwood, where I'm taking you next, for £1,500. He hadn't actually seen it. He knew where it was, and he was very familiar with Coniston. Now, another guy who wrote books around here was a man called Arthur Ransom, and he was quite connected to Ruskin. Now Arthur Ransom was born in about 1896, and again he wasn't from the Lake District, he was actually from Leeds, but he used to come here with his dad, and he wrote a series of books in the 1930s called Swallows and Amazons. The Amazons actually lived at this house here, Tent Lodge. It was a series of children's books it's like an amalgam, a mixture between Windermere and Coniston. Wildcat Island, or that's Peel Island, down at the south end of Coniston, you'll see later. So the Amazons lived here. The Swallows, or the Walker family, they lived in another property a little higher up. Now the connection between Arthur Ransom and Ruskin is a guy called W.G. Collingwood. W.G. Collingwood was Ruskin's personal secretary. And after Arthur Ransom's dad died, W.G. Collingwood rather took Ruskin under his wing. I think he was in danger of losing his way a little bit. There was a film made of Swallows and Amazons in 1974. Virginia McKenna starred in it, and they remade the film last year in 2015, and it was released about a month ago, and it has been quite well received, so hopefully that will generate lots of business for the Lake District. This house here is called Lane Head, this rather grand looking house, and this was where Ruskin's secretary W.G. Collingwood lived. Now he had a son called Robin Collingwood, and he's a Hadrian's Wall scholar. He's written a lot of books, and I talked to you yesterday about Milecastle 39 and 43. It was Robin Collingwood who devised this numbering system for the forts and Milecastles. And the Walker family, who are actually the Swallows in the story, they used to stay here at Bankground Farm. They would come on holiday. The Walker, that was a fictional name. The real name was Altuyan. Their dad was a doctor. He was Armenian. He was an Armenian doctor, apparently quite a brilliant man. And he was working in Syria, Aleppo, which is very topical right here, right now.